The airplane shuddered violently, jolting sleeping passengers awake with gasps and nervous laughter that quickly faded into uneasy silence. Trays rattled, coffee spilled, and overhead lights flickered as turbulence gripped the plane with a strength that felt almost personal. In row 10, her head was resting against the window, a soft snore escaping her lips, when the captain's voice came over the intercom, calm but carrying a tremor no one could ignore. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there are any experienced combat pilots on board, please make yourself known to the flight crew immediately." The cabin went still. For a moment, no one moved. Then all eyes began scanning the rows, searching. She stirred, blinking, unaware that the world around her was tilting toward a storm she thought she'd left behind years ago. Before we dive deeper into this unforgettable journey, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and real stories that stir the soul, take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support keeps these emotional stories alive. Her name was Claire Addison. At 32, she had once been one of the Air Force's brightest combat pilots, a woman who had spent countless hours in the cockpit, flying over foreign deserts with steady hands and unshakable nerves. But that was another lifetime. 3 years earlier, during a night mission, a split-second decision had gone wrong. A mechanical failure had caused her jet to lose altitude. She ejected at the last moment, but her co-pilot, her closest friend since flight school, didn't make it. Though the investigation cleared her of blame, the guilt carved into her like shrapnel. She walked away from the service, hung up her uniform, and swore never to fly again, not even as a passenger who thought about the controls. She moved to a quiet town, took a ground job, and tried to bury her past under layers of routine. This flight was supposed to be just a quick trip, an obligatory journey to attend her cousin's wedding. She booked a window seat, row 10, hoping to sleep through the flight, headphones in, eyes closed. But now, as she slowly woke and heard the captain's plea echo through the cabin, her stomach tightened in a way that felt achingly familiar. The flight attendant's face was pale as she rushed down the aisle toward the cockpit. Passengers whispered nervously, clutching armrests and each other's hands. The air smelled faintly of fear, sharp, electric, and contagious. Claire's heart started to hammer. She tried to stay still, to pretend she hadn't heard. But her training had been drilled too deep to ignore. The co-pilot, the captain explained later, had collapsed mid-flight from a sudden medical emergency. The plane had hit a severe storm pattern unexpectedly, and they needed someone experienced to help stabilize and navigate. This was no simulation. They were thousands of feet in the air, and the storm ahead was swelling like a dark ocean. The captain, though experienced, needed another trained set of hands to manage the aircraft and the emergency procedures. Claire's body moved before her mind caught up. She stood from row 10, her heart pounding like the roar of afterburners. Eyes turned to her as if the entire cabin exhaled at once. She quietly told the attendant her background, and within minutes she was led into the cockpit, a space she had sworn never to enter again. The moment the door shut behind her, the roar of the engines filled her ears, and memories she'd buried came flooding back, the cold metal of the controls, the vibration through her bones, the steady green glow of the instruments. The storm was closing in fast. Rain battered the windshield like stones, and lightning clawed at the clouds around them. The captain glanced at her with weary relief, explaining the situation quickly. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, her hands trembling as they hovered over the controls. For a heartbeat, doubt clawed at her. She remembered the night she lost her co-pilot, the helpless descent, the fireball in the distance. What if she failed again? What if she wasn't enough this time? Then she took a deep breath. Years of training snapped back into place like a puzzle locking together. Her hands steadied. Her voice when she spoke was clear and sharp, the voice of the pilot she once was. She took control of the instruments, adjusted their heading, and began communicating with air traffic control as if she had never left. The next 30 minutes were a dance between chaos and precision. The storm tossed the plane like a toy, lightning illuminating the cockpit in flashes. Passengers cried in the cabin, some praying, some silent. Claire guided the plane through turbulent air pockets, issuing commands, recalculating flight paths, and supporting the captain with decisions that came from instinct and memory. She blocked out everything but the sound of the engines and the rhythm of the instruments. At one point, a powerful downdraft sent the aircraft plunging. Alarms blared. The captain's knuckles whitened on the yoke. Claire's breath caught, but she didn't freeze. Her fingers flew across the controls, adjusting thrust, angle, and flaps. Slowly, the plane leveled out, climbing again. In that moment, the ghost of her co-pilot seemed to sit beside her. Not accusing, but proud. She whispered inside herself, "Not this time." When they finally broke through the storm into clear skies, the cockpit was bathed in golden sunlight. It poured through the windshield like a blessing. The turbulence eased, and for the first time in hours, the cabin behind them fell into a hush. Not of fear, but of stunned relief. Claire handed back the co-pilot's responsibilities as they neared the airport. She stayed until the wheels touched down, the aircraft landing smoothly to a chorus of cheers and sobs. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain leaned toward her with quiet gratitude. But she barely heard him. Her heart was swelling with something she hadn't felt since the night of the accident. Not guilt, not fear, but something purer, pride, healing. When she stepped out of the cockpit, passengers stared at her as if she'd walked through fire. Some clapped. Others simply watched in awe. She walked back to row 10, sat down, and stared out the window. Her hands were still trembling, but for the first time in years, they weren't trembling from fear. They were trembling from the weight she had just let go. After landing, paramedics rushed on board to help the co-pilot, and the captain gave a brief explanation to the passengers. People approached Claire, thanking her, some with tears in their eyes. But she only smiled softly, keeping her words few. She hadn't done it for applause. She had done it because deep down, she was still who she had always been, a pilot. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to The Gentle Truth. Your support helps us bring more inspiring and emotional stories to life. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Comment below with the moment that touched your heart the most. Your words make our storytelling community stronger. As she walked off the plane, the late afternoon sun hit her face. She paused for a moment, breathing it in. Row 10 had been just a seat for a passenger, but it had become the place where she took her life back. The captain had asked for a combat pilot, and fate had answered through her, not to save just the passengers, but to save herself.